The princess fell for a human prince, and the court turned against them. It was a city that shimmered with beauty, built from metals that glowed faintly in the light and glass that seemed to float in the air. The people moved quickly through the streets, each carrying out their tasks with precision. Hovering vehicles glided silently above, leaving trails of luminescent light in the early morning. Among them the princess walked, calm yet alert, observing everything around her. Princess Liara of Zythra was not like other royals. She carried herself with grace and intelligence, but her curiosity often led her into places and situations others would never dare enter. Today, however, her mind was not on the streets or the palace halls. Today, her attention was on a human, a visitor from a distant planet, an envoy from Earth named Captain Adrian. He was expected to arrive for a diplomatic mission, yet his presence brought more than politics. It brought an unfamiliar spark of curiosity into Liara's life. Humanity, the court often whispered, was weak, unpredictable, and chaotic. And yet, Liara wondered why she felt a strange anticipation at the thought of meeting this human man. The palace was alive with activity. Servants moved with silent efficiency, carrying trays of shimmering liquids and delicate food to the royal chambers. Guards adjusted their armor and weapons, preparing for the arrival of dignitaries from across the galaxy. Liara walked along the balcony that overlooked the central plaza, her long robes flowing gently in the wind. Her hair, silver with streaks of light blue, shimmered in the morning light. She took a deep breath, savoring the scent of metal and the faint tang of ozone that hung in the air. Her advisors waited inside, pacing nervously. They had already begun murmuring among themselves about the human envoy. "A human, Your Highness," one of them said, frowning. "They are unpredictable. We do not know what he might do. He could bring trouble to the kingdom." Liara smiled slightly, though she kept her expression calm. "And yet," she said softly, "we cannot ignore him. He comes as a representative of his people. We must observe, understand, and learn." Her advisors exchanged uneasy glances, sensing that she was already thinking beyond their fears. Hours later, the sky shifted to a soft purple as the human fleet approached the capital. Unlike the Zytheran ships, which were tall and crystalline, the human vessels were simple, functional, and sturdy. They did not shimmer or glow, but they moved with a steady reliability that was almost admirable. The Zytheran guards observed them carefully, noting every detail, every maneuver. And then, from one of these ships, Captain Adrian emerged. He was tall, with brown hair and eyes that seemed to hold a quiet confidence. His uniform was simple but neat, a sharp contrast to the elaborate attire of the Zytherans. He walked with purpose, his steps steady and unhurried, yet every movement seemed calculated. Liara watched from her balcony, intrigued. There was something different about him, something she could not yet understand. He did not carry the arrogance of some alien dignitaries, nor did he move with fear. He seemed balanced. The first meeting was formal. Adrian bowed respectfully and Liara nodded in return. Words were exchanged politely, but beneath the formalities, a subtle connection began to form. Liara noticed the way he listened carefully, the way his eyes seemed to study her expressions and movements, trying to understand her thoughts without prying. There was intelligence there, and something more, a spark of empathy that her people often lacked. In the following days, Liara and Adrian were required to meet regularly, attending council sessions, observing diplomatic discussions, and participating in joint exercises designed to foster cooperation between humans and Zytherans. Liara quickly noticed how different Adrian's approach was. He did not rely on elaborate technology alone. He relied on reasoning, improvisation, and understanding. When faced with a problem during a simulation of a planetary attack, Adrian suggested using simple tactics that no Zytheran officer had considered, and they worked perfectly. It was during one of these exercises that their first real moment of connection occurred. They stood on a simulation field, observing holographic enemies appearing in the distance. Liara had expected the exercise to be routine, but Adrian's calm demeanor and quick thinking changed everything. He directed the Zytheran forces with unexpected clarity, combining human strategies with Zytheran technology in a way that surprised everyone. "You see," he said quietly to Liara, "it's not about the weapons or the ships. It's about understanding your opponent and using what you have in ways they don't expect." Liara nodded, impressed. "You think differently," she said. "Most here rely only on power. You use reason." A faint smile appeared on his face. "Sometimes reason is stronger than power." The spark between them was small but undeniable. In the following days, their interactions became more natural, more personal. They discussed strategies, exchanged thoughts on history and culture, and even shared small jokes, though carefully, as the court always seemed to be watching. Rumors began to circulate. Whispers of the princess and the human envoy, speaking privately, working closely, spending time together outside official duties. The court, which had been skeptical from the start, began to grow restless. Some nobles openly disapproved, seeing the human as a threat to tradition. "A human," one noble hissed in a hallway conversation. "How can the princess even consider him? He is nothing but an outsider." Others, more cautious, observed quietly, waiting for a misstep that could justify their warnings. Liara felt the pressure, though she refused to show it. She knew the court was watching, waiting for her to falter, waiting for her to choose caution over curiosity. Yet, something inside her pushed her to continue. There was a spark in Adrian, a sense of honor and courage that she had never seen in her own people. It was dangerous, yes, but also invigorating. One evening, under the pale light of the twin moons, Liara and Adrian met on the palace balcony, away from the formalities of the court. The city below was silent, and the air was cool and fragrant with the scent of distant gardens. They spoke of distant worlds, of humans and Zytherans, of the challenges they faced and the opportunities that lay ahead. "I know your people fear humans," Liara said softly. "They do not understand us, and we do not understand them. Yet I cannot help but think, perhaps there is more to learn than to fear." Adrian looked at her, his expression serious but gentle. "Fear comes from ignorance," he said. "Understanding comes from courage, the courage to face the unknown and learn from it." Their conversation lingered long into the night. There was no touch, no overt declaration, only the quiet recognition of a bond forming, fragile yet undeniable. In the weeks that followed, the bond strengthened. They began meeting in secret more often, discussing strategies, sharing ideas, and slowly learning about each other's worlds. But the court did not remain idle. Whispers grew louder, and subtle warnings were delivered. Advisors tried to intervene, cautioning Liara about the dangers of befriending a human. They hinted at political consequences, the anger of distant allies, and the potential scandal that could arise. Liara listened politely, but refused to be swayed. She had always been strong-willed, and now she felt a determination she had never experienced before. She could see Adrian's value, not just as a human, but as a partner in thought, in strategy, and perhaps in something deeper she did not yet fully understand. One afternoon, during a particularly tense council session, a messenger arrived with urgent news. A neighboring system had launched an unexpected attack on one of Zythera's outlying colonies. Panic spread through the council. The princess observed quietly, analyzing the situation. While the Zytheran generals debated, Adrian stepped forward, suggesting a tactical maneuver that combined human strategies with Zytheran technology. The council was skeptical. A human, an outsider, daring to advise them on military matters. Yet, Liara trusted him. She allowed the plan to proceed against the objections of the council. The result was swift and decisive. the attack was repelled with minimal loss. The court, witnessing the success, had no choice but to acknowledge Adrian's ingenuity. Yet their resentment did not disappear. If anything, it grew. A human had achieved what many Zytherans could not, and that was difficult for some to accept. That evening, as the city settled under the glow of its twin moons, Liara stood once again on her balcony, reflecting on the day's events. Adrian approached silently, joining her in the cool night air. "You were right," she said quietly, more to herself than to him. "Sometimes courage is stronger than fear. Sometimes understanding is stronger than prejudice." Adrian nodded. "And sometimes," he said gently, "a spark between two people can grow into something that changes everything." Liara looked at him, feeling a mixture of curiosity, admiration, and something deeper stirring in her heart. She did not know what the future held. She knew the court would continue to resist, that challenges would rise, and that danger might come from unexpected places. But for the first time, she felt a sense of clarity, of purpose, and of connection that was entirely her own. The human prince from a distant world had arrived, and with him, a new chapter for Zythera had begun. And though the court may have whispered and plotted, Liara knew one thing with certainty. She would not turn away from what was right, from what was just, or from the spark that had begun between them. And so, under the twin moons of Zythera, the princess and the human envoy stood together, silently watching the stars, unaware that their bond, quiet, fragile, and daring, would soon be tested in ways that neither world had ever imagined. The palace corridors were alive with whisper, the soft murmur of noble voices carrying across polished floors and ornate walls. The morning sunlight reflected off the crystalline surfaces, scattering rainbows across the marble, but no light could pierce the shadow that had begun to grow in the hearts of the court. News of the princess's closeness to the human envoy had spread quickly, and while some were curious, many were deeply concerned. For them, tradition and protocol were sacred, and a human, a being from a distant, unproven world, was an unpredictable anomaly. Princess Liara walked through the halls, her robes brushing the floor in quiet elegance. Her mind, however, was not on fashion or appearances. It was on Adrian. The human had proven himself clever, insightful, and brave, but now the court's scrutiny had grown sharper. Even the advisors who once smiled politely now looked at her with suspicion. They had begun asking subtle questions about her meetings with Adrian, about the nature of their conversations, and whether he had any hidden motives. Liara knew she had to tread carefully. But she refused to let fear dictate her actions. She had learned from Adrian that courage often required defiance, and understanding required risk. Today, she would meet him in the gardens, a secluded area far from the eyes of most courtiers. The palace gardens were a marvel of engineering and artistry. Towering plants of silver and emerald grew alongside artificial streams, their waters sparkling with tiny floating lights. Alien flowers bloomed with colors humans had no names for, and the air was fragrant with scents that seemed almost unreal. Adrian was already there when she arrived, examining a small, mechanical device that had been left by human engineers in the gift of technology exchange. It was a simple object by Zytheran standards, yet it carried a subtle genius in its design. He looked up and smiled as she approached. "Good morning, Princess," he said, his voice calm and steady, carrying a warmth that made the tension of the court feel distant. "Good morning, Adrian," Liara replied. She paused, then said quietly, "You handled yourself well yesterday. The council had little choice but to accept your advice, though I am sure many are still uneasy." Adrian's smile widened slightly, but he shook his head. "They will adapt." "They always do. It takes time for minds to open, especially when pride is involved. But it will happen. They have to see what we can accomplish together." Liara nodded. "You speak with the confidence of one who knows the value of humans." She stepped closer, examining the device he held. "And yet, some still believe humans are weak, inferior and unworthy of trust. Strength isn't always in size or technology, Adrian said. It's in ingenuity, courage, and perseverance. Humans have all three, and if you trust in that, princess, you will see it too. Liara studied him for a moment, feeling a stirring of admiration she could not ignore. There was something about his clarity of thought, his calm determination, and his willingness to challenge assumptions that fascinated her. But as always, the shadow of the court lingered. The following days were a whirlwind of activity. Diplomatic meetings, strategy sessions, and training exercises left little time for private conversation. Yet every encounter with Adrian brought Liara a sense of clarity and purpose. She observed him carefully, noting his reactions, his choices, and his methods. He was different from any other being she had encountered, human, yes, but also remarkably intelligent, resourceful, and courageous. However, the court's opposition intensified. Rumors became accusations, and subtle warnings became overt protests. Advisors who once served quietly now challenged her decisions openly. "Your Highness," one elder said sharply during a council session, "it is unwise to rely on an outsider. The human's knowledge is limited. Our kingdom's security should not rest in the hands of someone whose loyalty is uncertain." Liara remained composed, her silver-blue eyes calm but resolute. "And yet," she replied evenly, "his actions have proven his worth. We cannot measure merit solely by species. Decisions must be based on skill, intelligence, and judgment." The elder's eyes narrowed, but he said no more, though murmurs spread through the room. The court was divided, and Liara knew that the whispers would soon become plots. The next challenge came unexpectedly. Intelligence reports indicated that a rival alien faction, the Zarathians, had begun to mobilize near the border of Zythera's territory. Their fleet was small but aggressive, and their tactics unpredictable. The council immediately convened to plan a response, and the room buzzed with tension. As the generals debated, Adrian quietly analyzed the reports, noting patterns in the Zarathian movements that Zytheran minds had overlooked. He suggested a series of maneuvers that combined human strategy with Zytheran technology, exploiting the weaknesses in the enemy fleet. The suggestion was met with immediate resistance. "A human proposing tactics for the defense of our system," one general scoffed. "This is absurd. We have trained officers who have served for centuries. His knowledge is insufficient," Liara intervened before the argument escalated. "We will proceed with a trial of his plan," she commanded firmly. "If it works, we will have evidence of its effectiveness. If it fails, we will adjust, but we will not dismiss potential solutions because of prejudice." The council reluctantly agreed, though many voices muttered under their breath. Adrian's plan was implemented with caution, and the fleet moved according to his guidance. The battle that followed was swift and decisive. The Zarathians were outmaneuvered at every turn, forced into retreat by strategies they had not anticipated. Losses were minimal, and the kingdom's borders remained secure. The victory sparked a mixture of admiration and resentment within the court. Some grudgingly acknowledged Adrian's brilliance, while others seethed at the fact that a human had demonstrated what many Zytherans could not. Liara, however, felt a quiet satisfaction. She had seen the value of courage, ingenuity, and understanding firsthand. She had seen what humans could contribute when given the opportunity. Yet the success also drew sharper scrutiny. Rumors of the princess's affection for the human began to circulate more openly. Courtiers whispered in hallways, questioning her judgment and speculating about her intentions. Some even suggested that she might be compromising the kingdom's safety for personal reasons. Liara ignored most of the whispers, but she could not escape them entirely. One afternoon, as she walked through the gardens with Adrian, a message arrived from the palace council. They requested an immediate audience. Liara read the note with a calm expression but could feel the tension rising. In the council chamber, the atmosphere was heavy with suspicion. The elder who had previously challenged her spoke first. "Princess," he said, his tone sharp, "it has become clear that your association with the human envoy is causing unrest. Members of the court and even some allies question your judgment. This cannot continue without consequences." Liara met his gaze evenly. "I am aware of the concern, Elder, but my decisions are guided by logic, evidence, and the welfare of the kingdom. Captain Adrian has proven his capability and his loyalty is unquestionable. That is the standard I will follow." The council murmured and some exchanged uncomfortable glances. "But the people, your advisors," another voice began, only to be cut off by Liara's firm hand gesture. "The people will follow leadership when it is wise," she said, "and I will not allow prejudice to cloud judgment. We must act on merit, not fear or tradition." Adrian, standing beside her quietly, offered no words, but his presence was steady, supportive, and reassuring. Liara felt the strength of that support, a bond growing deeper despite the obstacles around them. Over the following weeks, Liara and Adrian continued their secret meetings, strategizing and sharing ideas. They learned from each other, combining human ingenuity with Zytheran technology in ways that astonished even the most skeptical. They devised new defensive measures, improved communication protocols, and created contingency plans that strengthened the kingdom's security. Yet the court's opposition never waned. Attempts to discredit Adrian became more frequent, and some nobles even attempted to spread false rumors about his intentions. Liara faced veiled threats and direct warnings, but she refused to yield. Her resolve grew stronger with each challenge, as did the connection she felt with Adrian. One night, under the soft glow of the twin moons, Liara and Adrian met in a quiet garden pavilion. The air was cool, scented with alien flowers, and the stars sparkled above in silent witness. "They will not give up easily," Liara said, her voice quiet but determined. "The court is relentless," Adrian nodded. "No, they won't, but neither are you, Princess, and neither am I. We cannot control their fears, but we can control our actions. We can show them that courage, ingenuity, and understanding are stronger than prejudice." Liara smiled faintly. "You make it sound simple, though I know it is anything but. Still, it gives me hope." Adrian looked at her steadily. "Hope is the first step to change. The rest is action." They spoke long into the night, planning, sharing ideas, and quietly building the foundation of trust and partnership that would define their journey ahead. They knew that challenges would come, that the court would continue to oppose them, and that danger might appear from unexpected directions. Yet in that quiet moment beneath the stars, they found a rare sense of clarity and determination. The princess and the human envoy had begun to weave their alliance, a bond that would soon face tests neither could yet imagine. But even in the face of opposition, their partnership grew stronger, and the sparks of understanding, courage, and defiance began to shine brightly, a promise of what might be achieved when fear was set aside, and merit and heart guided the way. The morning light in Zythera was sharp, almost electric, reflecting off the palace towers and the polished floors of the council chambers. The city, as beautiful as ever, seemed unaware of the growing tension inside the palace. Princess Liara walked through the halls with a quiet determination, her mind focused on the rising threat from the Zarathians and the stubborn opposition of her own court. Every step she took carried the weight of responsibility, not only as a leader, but as someone who had chosen to trust an outsider in a world that valued tradition above all else. Adrian met her in the training grounds, where Zytheran soldiers were running drills under the watchful eyes of their instructors. The human envoy had spent the past days learning more about the kingdom's military tactics, combining them with his own human experience. Though he was an outsider, his presence commanded a quiet respect among the soldiers, who could not ignore the effectiveness of his strategies during the previous encounter with the Zarathians. "Princess," Adrian said, approaching her, "we have a problem." His voice was calm, but his eyes reflected concern. Liara turned to him, sensing the gravity in his tone. "What is it?" "The Zarathians are planning something more complex than we expected," he explained. "Their scouts have been spotted closer to the outer colonies, and their fleet movements suggest they are preparing an ambush. They may be testing our defenses, trying to find weaknesses." Liara frowned. "Then we must respond quickly. What do you propose?" Adrian took a deep breath. "We need to anticipate their moves, not just react. I have an idea that combines human tactics with our technology. It is risky, but it could give us the advantage we need. The problem is, the Council may not approve." Liara's gaze hardened. "Then we will show them. We have little choice if we want to protect the kingdom." She felt a surge of determination, stronger than ever. The whispers and opposition of the court could not stop her. Not now, not ever. As the day progressed, the council convened in the grand chamber, their expressions tense and wary. The chamber was filled with advisors, generals, and nobles, each waiting to witness the debate over the proposed plan. When Adrian explained his strategy, combining Zytheran fleet coordination with human-inspired maneuvers, the room erupted in disagreement. "This is foolish," one general shouted. "We cannot rely on a human's untested tactics to defend our colonies. Our fleet has served for centuries. Why risk everything on an outsider?" Liara stood firm, her voice calm but firm. "Because it works, and because the safety of our people is more important than pride or prejudice. We will execute this plan, and the results will prove its merit." The council's murmurs grew louder, some questioning her judgment, others openly defying her. Yet Liara did not waver. She trusted in Adrian and she trusted in her own judgment. The decision was made. The plan would proceed. The fleet mobilized at dusk, ships moving silently through the violet skies of Zythera. Adrian worked alongside the commanders, giving instructions, adjusting maneuvers, and observing every detail. The princess stood on the observation balcony, watching the fleet move with precision. Her heart pounded with a mixture of fear and hope. She knew the stakes were high. One wrong move could mean disaster. The battle began with a sudden strike from the Zarathians. Their ships attacked in waves, trying to exploit any weakness in the Zytheran formation. Yet Adrian's strategy held firm. He had predicted the enemy's approach, and the Zytheran fleet, guided by his instructions, countered with unexpected efficiency. Liara's eyes followed the movements closely, her mind racing to anticipate each turn. The Zarathians were clever, but the combination of human ingenuity and Zytheran technology proved overwhelming. Ships moved in coordinated patterns that confused the enemy, forcing them to scatter and retreat. Explosions lit the skies, but the Zytheran forces suffered minimal losses. When the final Zarathian ship fled, silence fell over the battlefield. The victory was complete, and yet the council's reaction was mixed. Some generals bowed in reluctant respect, acknowledging the brilliance of the plan, while others scowled, their pride wounded. Liara descended to the command center, where Adrian was reviewing reports and debriefing officers. She approached him quietly, standing beside him as he analyzed the data. "You did well," she said softly, a faint smile touching her lips. Adrian looked up, returning her gaze. "We did well together." Their eyes met, and for a moment the tension of the past weeks faded. There was a silent acknowledgement of trust, respect, and something deeper, a bond that had grown stronger through shared challenges and triumphs. Yet the court's resistance had not disappeared. Rumors continued to circulate, and whispers of the princess's favoritism toward the human envoy grew louder. Some nobles began to openly question her ability to lead, suggesting that her judgment was clouded by personal feelings. One afternoon, as Liara walked through the palace halls, she overheard a conversation between two courtiers. "She is risking everything," one said. "The human is clever, yes, but he is an outsider. This cannot end well." Liara paused, listening quietly. She felt the weight of their words but refused to be swayed. Her path was clear. She would continue to trust in merit, in courage, and in understanding. The human beside her had proven his worth time and again. That was enough. The next challenge came unexpectedly. A message arrived from a distant colony, reporting unusual activity on the borders. Scouts had spotted an advanced fleet moving through uncharted space, and there were signs of a potential invasion. The council convened immediately, tension filling the room like a storm ready to break. Adrian analyzed the reports with calm precision. "This fleet is different," he said. "Their movements are deliberate, but they are not yet fully committed. If we act carefully, we can intercept them before they reach the colonies." A general scoffed. "And we will follow the orders of a human. This is unacceptable. Our fleets are trained, our strategies proven. We do not need outsiders interfering with our command." Liara stood, her voice firm and unwavering. "We will act on what is effective, not what is comfortable. Adrian's plan is the best option to protect our people. We cannot allow pride to cloud our judgment." The council debated for hours, but Liara's determination held firm. At last, the plan was approved. The fleet moved out, guided by Adrian's strategy and the coordination of Zytheran commanders. The battle that followed was intense. The enemy fleet attacked with precision, using tactics that tested every skill and strategy the Zytherans possessed. Yet Adrian's plan held, adapting to each maneuver with calm logic and clever improvisation. Liara watched from the observation balcony, her heart pounding with each turn of the battle. Ships maneuvered in patterns that seemed almost impossible, striking from unexpected angles and using the environment to their advantage. The human strategies, combined with Zytheran technology, created a force that the enemy could not anticipate. Slowly, the tide turned. The enemy fleet was forced to retreat, their attacks failing to break the defenses. When the final enemy ship fled, silence fell over the battlefield once more. The victory was undeniable, yet the council's reaction remained divided. Some bowed in respect, acknowledging the effectiveness of the strategy, while others muttered under their breath, unwilling to admit the role of a human in their success. Liara descended to the command center, where Adrian was reviewing reports with the officers. She approached him, her steps quiet but purposeful. "You were right," she said softly. "Courage and understanding are stronger than prejudice." Adrian looked at her, his expression calm but filled with quiet pride. "And so is trust," he said. "We cannot control the fears of others, but we can act with integrity and wisdom. That is what matters." For the first time, Liara felt a sense of complete clarity. She understood that leadership was not about pleasing everyone or adhering to tradition blindly. It was about making choices that protected her people, embraced merit, and acknowledged courage, wherever it was found. Yet the court's opposition was far from over. Rumors of her growing closeness with Adrian had reached even distant allies. Messages arrived from other systems, expressing concern about the princess's judgment and the influence of a human envoy. Some suggested political alliances might be threatened, while others warned of possible sabotage or betrayal. Liara ignored the warnings, focusing instead on the immediate challenges. She and Adrian continued to meet, strategize, and strengthen their bond. Each day they grew more confident in their partnership, and the spark between them, quiet but undeniable, began to grow into something stronger, a connection forged in trust, shared purpose, and mutual respect. One evening, under the twin moons, Liara and Adrian walked through the palace gardens, their steps silent on the crystalline paths. The air was fragrant, the flowers glowing softly in the moonlight, and the city below shimmered like a sea of stars. "They will not stop," Liara said quietly. "The court, the nobles, even distant allies, they all resist what they cannot understand." Adrian nodded. "No, they won't. But resistance does not mean failure. It means we have a challenge to overcome. We act with integrity, we act with courage, and we show them the value of merit, not prejudice." Liara looked at him, feeling a sense of hope she had not known before. "Together," she said softly. "Together," he agreed. In that quiet moment, beneath the glowing moons of Zythera, the princess and the human envoy knew that challenges would continue, that opposition would rise, and that danger might appear from unexpected directions. Yet their bond, strengthened by shared victories and mutual respect, had become unbreakable. And as the stars sparkled above, they understood that the path ahead, though difficult, held the promise of change, change that could redefine what it meant to lead, to trust, and to value courage above all else. The spark of understanding and defiance had grown into a flame. And while the court still whispered, while the world still doubted, Liara and Adrian moved forward, ready to face whatever challenges awaited them together. The twin suns of Zythera were just rising, casting long golden beams across the palace and the surrounding city. The capital shimmered as usual, but inside the palace walls, tension hung thick in the air. Rumors of the princess's bond with the human envoy had reached every corner of the kingdom. The council had grown more restless, their whispers growing bolder, their complaints more direct. Yet none of this could shake Princess Liara. She had faced opposition before, but now the stakes were higher. The Zarathians were no longer testing the kingdom. They were preparing a full-scale invasion. Adrian had spent the night reviewing intelligence reports, his human instincts, and reasoning quietly shaping strategies that the Zytheran generals had overlooked. His mind worked differently, blending logic with creativity, seeing patterns others ignored. Liara watched him quietly as he moved across the command table, pointing at charts, adjusting projections, and speaking calmly with the officers. "You have changed the way they think," she said softly, stepping closer. Adrian glanced up, a small smile on his face. "No, Princess, I've shown them what's possible when we think beyond fear and tradition. They'll adapt. They always do, but right now we need action. The Zarathians will strike soon, and we must be ready." Liara nodded, her eyes following the lines of his calculations. The fleet was spread across multiple systems, but Adrian had identified a weak point, a route the enemy would likely take. It was risky, but if executed correctly, it could turn the tide of the war. The council meeting that morning was tense. The elder who had opposed Adrian from the start glared at him across the table. "A human strategy cannot replace centuries of experience," he said sharply. "Are you certain we should trust this?" Liara's voice cut through the murmurs, calm but commanding. "We will trust what works. We cannot allow pride to blind us. Adrian has proven his worth. Today he will prove it again." Some members of the council murmured their disapproval, but the decision was made. The fleet would follow Adrian's plan, guided by both his strategies and Liara's oversight. The hours passed quickly. Ships moved into position, engines humming softly, while scouts monitored the enemy approach. Liara and Adrian stood together in the command chamber, reviewing every detail. The humans' simplicity of design combined with Zytheran technology made the plan unconventional but precise. "The Zarathians will not expect this," Adrian said quietly. "Their attacks are usually direct. They value strength and numbers. But we'll use misdirection, speed, and the environment to our advantage. They'll be caught off guard." Liara nodded. "Then we must be perfect. There is no room for error." As the sun climbed higher, the first signs of the enemy fleet appeared on the horizon. Dozens of ships, sleek and deadly, moved in formation, their intentions clear. The council held its breath. Some generals clenched their fists, unwilling to admit their skepticism. Others observed quietly, seeing the human strategy unfold before them. The battle began suddenly. Enemy ships advanced with precision, striking at points they believed were weak. But Adrian's plan had accounted for everything. Zytheran ships moved in coordinated patterns, drawing the enemy into traps that exploited their aggression. Small strike teams, guided by human tactics, targeted critical systems, disrupting the enemy formation. Liara watched as the sky lit up with energy blasts and explosions, the sound of battle distant but intense through the protective shields of the palace observation platform. The strategy was working. Ships moved with fluidity, striking where the enemy least expected. The Zarathians faltered, confusion spreading through their ranks. "Princess, adjust the southern flank," Adrian instructed calmly. "Their command ship is vulnerable. We can cut off their retreat if we act now." Liara relayed the commands, her voice steady, and the fleet responded. The southern flank shifted, trapping the enemy in a narrow passage between asteroid fields. Their numbers were irrelevant now. Their formation was broken, their strategy exposed. The battle raged for hours. The Zarathians fought fiercely, but every move they made was anticipated and countered. Liara and Adrian worked seamlessly together, communicating across channels, analyzing data, and directing forces. The human's insight and the princess's decisiveness created a force neither the council nor the enemy had ever seen. At last, the enemy began to retreat, their ships scattering in disarray. Explosions marked the last of their advance, and the skies of Zythera cleared. Victory was theirs. The fleet returned to the colonies, triumphant but weary. Inside the palace, the council convened once more. The mood had shifted. Skepticism had been replaced with respect. The elder who had opposed Adrian looked at the human, his expression grudging but honest. "It seems we underestimated you," he admitted. "The strategy, it worked beyond expectation." Adrian inclined his head politely. "I am pleased it was effective. My goal is the safety of Zythera, not recognition." Liara stepped forward, her presence commanding attention. "And that is what matters," she said. "Skill, courage, and understanding are what protect our people. Prejudice and pride are weaknesses we cannot afford." A silence fell over the council chamber. Slowly, nods of acknowledgement spread. The message was clear. Merit, not species or tradition, would guide the kingdom forward. Later that evening, Liara and Adrian walked together through the gardens. The air was cool, scented with alien flowers, and the twin moons cast a soft glow over the crystalline paths. The city below shimmered, quiet now after the chaos of the day. "We did it," Liara said softly. "The fleet, the colonies, it worked," Adrian smiled. "We did it together, that is what matters. The rest, the whispers, the doubts, they will fade in time." Liara looked at him, feeling the bond that had grown over weeks of challenges, strategy, and shared courage. She realized that what she felt for him went beyond admiration. It was trust, respect, and a connection that had proven itself under fire. "You have changed Zythera," she said, "not just with your strategies, but with what you've shown everyone here. Courage, ingenuity, humanity." Adrian shook his head, a modest smile on his face. "I only showed what humans can do when they are given a chance. You believed in that chance, Princess. You made it possible." They walked in silence for a moment, the beauty of the gardens and the calm of the city a stark contrast to the battle they had endured. For the first time, Liara allowed herself to hope, not just for victory, but for something more. The court's whispers had not disappeared entirely, but their tone had changed. Where there had been doubt, there was now cautious respect. Some nobles still resisted, but even they could not deny the results. The human envoy had proven himself indispensable, and the princess's judgment had been validated. Over the next days, the kingdom began to recover from the attack. Colonies were reinforced, trade routes secured, and defenses strengthened. Liara and Adrian continued their collaboration, working to ensure that the Zarathians, or any other threat, could never surprise Zythera again. One evening, as the city slept under the glow of the moons, Liara and Adrian stood on a balcony overlooking the capital. The stars sparkled above, and the soft hum of the city below was a reminder of the life they had fought to protect. "You were right," Liara said quietly. Hope is only the first step. Action is what changes the world. Adrian looked at her, his expression steady and warm. And courage, princess. Courage to act even when others doubt. Courage to trust in what is right, not what is safe. Liara nodded, feeling the truth in his words. She had learned that leadership was not about pleasing everyone, nor about adhering blindly to tradition. It was about making choices guided by merit, courage, and the desire to protect those who could not protect themselves. Their hands brushed lightly, a simple gesture filled with meaning. It was a bond forged in trust, in shared challenges, and in the quiet understanding that they could rely on each other, no matter what the future held. The court's final acknowledgement came during a ceremony to honor the victory. The council formally recognized Adrian's contributions and praised Liara's wisdom in allowing the humans' insights to guide the fleet. For the first time, the human envoy was publicly celebrated, not as an outsider, but as a valued partner of the princess. As they stood together on the palace balcony, facing the citizens of Zythra, Liara and Adrian knew that their journey was far from over. The universe was vast, full of challenges and dangers, but they also knew that with courage, ingenuity, and trust, they could face anything together. The princess turned to the human who had changed everything. "This is only the beginning," she said, her voice filled with hope and determination. Adrian smiled, his gaze steady. "Then we will face it together, princess. Whatever comes next, we will face it as one." The people below cheered, the twin moons casting a silver glow over the city. It was a celebration not just of victory, but of courage, understanding, and the triumph of merit over prejudice. The princess and the human envoy had proven that unity, trust, and bravery could change the course of a kingdom, and perhaps even the galaxy. And as the stars twinkled above Zythra, a new era began, one where humans and aliens could stand together, where courage was celebrated, and where the bond between two determined souls could inspire hope across worlds. Princess Liara and Captain Adrian, side by side, watched the horizon. They had faced doubt, opposition, and danger, yet they had emerged stronger. The court had learned a lesson in humility, the people had witnessed courage, and the universe had glimpsed the potential of two worlds working together. The journey had not ended, but one thing was certain. The spark between the princess and the human envoy had grown into a flame, and it would light the path forward, guiding Zythra toward a future filled with hope, strength, and endless possibilities. The princess fell for a human prince, and the court turned against them.